Hello everybody, thank you for joining me and I hope you're doing well. Today's daf is Shevuot Daf 24 Amud A. So let's dive straight in. The Gemara answers, Reish Lakish could say to you, when we say that a more inclusive prohibition which adds additional aspects to the prohibition for the same individual can take effect when there's already prohibition in place, it is regard to a prohibition that occurs on its own, like the prohibition against eating on Yom Kippur, which is more inclusive than the prohibition against eating non-kosher food, and therefore takes effect. But with regard to a prohibition that occurs by the act of a person himself, i.e. an oath or vow, we do not say that because it is more inclusive it can take effect. Also with regard to items that are already forbidden by Torah law. The Gemara asks, according to Reish Lakish, who understands the mission to be dealing with a case of one who took an oath about less than a full measure, it is due to this reason that Rabbi Shimon deemed him exempt, one who takes an oath prohibiting himself from eating non-kosher food. As is taught in the Braita, Rabbi Shimon says, any amount is sufficient to render one liable to receive lashes, and sages say that a measure of an olive book to determine only liability to bring an offering. According to Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon holds that one is already under oath from Mount Sinai, even with regard to less than a full measure. And for that reason, the oath does not take effect. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, who understands the mission to be referring to an oath that includes erstwhile permitted items, what is the reason Rabbi Shimon deemed one exempt from bringing an offering for breaking his oath not eating non-kosher food? The Gemara answers, isn't the reason that the first Tana holds that the individual is liable for violating his oath only due to the fact that the oath generates a more inclusive prohibition? In this matter, Rabbi Shimon conforms to his standard line of reasoning in that he does not hold that a more inclusive prohibition takes effect where a pre-existing prohibition is in place. This is according with that which is taught in a Braita. Rabbi Shimon says, one who eats non-kosher meat on Yom Kippur is exempt from bringing an offering for eating Yom Kippur, despite the fact that prohibition against eating Yom Kippur is a more inclusive prohibition than that of eating non-kosher meat, as on that day one may not eat anything. From the verse, or if anyone take an oath clearly with his lips to do evil or to do good in Leviticus 5:4, the sage derived that one is liable to bring an offering for an oath or an utterance only when the oath is such that it could be inverted from a positive to the negative or vice versa. For example, one is liable for violating an oath to eat because one can also take an oath not to eat. The Gemara asks, and granted, according to the opinion of Reish Lakish, you find a case where the oath can be negative or positive. Therefore, one is liable, according to the rabbis, when he takes an oath that he will eat any amount, since he could also take an oath that he will not eat any amount. But according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, granted, if you find a case of a negative oath, and the oath not to eat non-kosher animals takes effect when it includes other erstwhile permitted items. But how can you find a positive version of this oath? An oath to eat non-kosher animals can take effect, as eating non-kosher animals is prohibited by Torah law. Rather, do not distinguish between the form and the latter clauses of the Mishnah based on whether he specifies what he is eating. In both cases, he takes an oath not to eat without specifying. In the case where he eats something inedible, he is exempt in accordance with that which Rava says. So let's explain that. What did Rava say? Ela Kidvara. The version of the text appearing in the standard edition of the Talmud is one amended and adopted by Rashi. According to that version of the text, the Gemara is rejecting the previous understanding of the Mishnah that one is liable when he eats non-kosher food because he specifies that his oath applies to these non-kosher foods as well as to some permitted foods. This is contrary to the earlier clause where one is not liable for eating inedible items, and he simply took an oath not to eat and did not specifically include inedible food. Rava claims that both clauses of the Mishnah are referring to unspecified oath not to eat, and the reason one is exempt when he eats inedible items is that this is not considered eating. One is liable when he eats forbidden food, even though he's already under oath from Mount Sinai not to eat that food, because the unspecified oath implicitly includes permitted food, and therefore the oath takes effect with regard to all food. According to Rav's interpretation, Rav, Shmuel, and Rabbi Yochanan's assertion that when the Mishnah stated that one is liable for eating non-kosher food is referring to a case where one also incorporates permitted items into the oath, does not mean that one must do so explicitly. It is sufficient that the oath applies to previously permitted items along with those that are forbidden. In fact, if one takes an oath that specifies that one is prohibited from eating certain foods that are not kosher, and also specifies that one is prohibited from eating certain permitted foods, the oath will not apply to non-kosher foods, since each item specified is regarded as a separate oath, and an oath that prohibits only items that are already forbidden does not take effect. See the alternative explanation of Rashi and 24 being Tosfot. The Midrash also understands the Gemara citing of Rava to be an answer to the question about inversion from negative to positive. He explains, based on a version of the text rejected by Rashi, that the Gemara cites Rava in order to demonstrate that although one takes an oath not to eat and then eats something inedible, he is exempt. That is not true in the inverse case, where one takes an oath to eat and then eats dirt or some other inedible substance. According to the Midrash, eating dirt constitutes fulfillment of the oath, and therefore the oath not to eat can be inverted as an oath to eat, which can be fulfilled even by eating dirt or non-kosher food. And Rava said that if one said, "On my oath I will not eat," and he ate dirt, he is exempt, since eating an inedible substance is not considered to be eating. Eating non-kosher meat is considered to be eating. For that reason, the latter clause of the mission states that one is liable for doing so if he took an oath not to eat. The oath takes effect with regard to non-kosher items because, as Rabbi Yochanan noted, it includes items that otherwise be permitted. Rav Mari said, we learned in the mission 22b as well, that eating non-kosher food is considered eating. As if one said, "It is conan for my wife to derive benefit from me if I ate today," and he had eaten carcasses or treifot, repugnant creature or creeping animals, his wife is prohibited from deriving benefit from him. The Gemara asks, how many cases be compared? There, since he initially ate the forbidden item and only then took an oath saying that he did not eat. Let's finish the sentence on to the next onward. In taking the oath, he granted significance to the non-kosher food, and this is why his eating forbidden items are considered to be eaten. Thank you for listening and wish you all the best. Bye.